Hi, my name is Jack McLean and I'm the founder of Prepare Like a Pro. Growing up, I loved playing cricket and football and had a strong passion for helping others. Over the past 11 years working in the industry, I've been lucky enough to have worked alongside Sean Murphy, the head strength and conditioning coach at Essendon, Luke Boyd, physical performance manager at Hawthorn, and interned under Andrew Russell, high performance director at Carlton. I started Prepare Like a Pro after my time as a strength and conditioning coach at Hawthorn Football Club to help developing footballers gain a competitive edge with AFL standard preparation methods. If you're a developing footballer wanting to take your game to the next level, we'd love to help you. At Prepare Like a Pro, you can expect to not only improve your athleticism, but also lower your risk of injury or overload. There are training programs suitable for every level of involvement. You choose the one that best suits your goals and personal motivation. Head to our Inquire Now page. We'll get back to you soon.
Welcome back to the Prepare Like a Pro podcast. This week on the show, we have Jay Ellis, the strength and conditioning coach of Melbourne United, who just recently won 21 championship. Really looking forward to this chat with Jay. Lucky enough to learn under him at the Woodford Sports Science internship a number of years ago, and picked up his passion for the field as well as his knowledge in the industry. So really looking forward to this chat, guys. Before working at Melbourne United, he was the high performance manager at Casey Demons in the VFL. He has also been rehabilitation assistant at Melbourne Football Club and interned at Collingwood Football Club. Prior to that, he worked in the junior development space with Vic Metro and Western Jets. And before we start episode 65, the Prepare Like a Pro podcast mission is to empower aspiring athletes with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals and to strengthen the AFL community. So if you like the show, please follow us on Instagram and subscribe to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. But thanks for joining us, Jay.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, good to see you again, mate.
Good to see you too, mate. And we'll dive straight in. We'll take us back to the beginning. When did you discover you had a passion for strength and conditioning?
Oh God, it's probably showing my age a little bit. But probably when I figured out I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. So that sort of goes back to my later school years. But I took a pretty traditional path these days. A lot of strength and conditioning coaches. I went through sports science or exercise science, human movement at Victoria University. Initially, I wasn't quite sure where it was going to lead me. I was actually looking at bridging into physio and looked at a few different options, but probably at the end of my first year after my placement in a physio clinic, I realized physio wasn't for me. So I looked at alternate options, and strength and conditioning was sort of becoming quite apparent that that's something I had real interest in. So I was sort of rehabilitating my own injuries through football, and that's probably back around 2007, 2008 sort of time-wise. But realistically, my second year of university is when I sort of really knew that strength and conditioning was it, as opposed to physiotherapy or something more research-based.
Yeah, and for those tuning in, developing S&Cs at a sports science degree that might be thinking the same way, how did you go about doing that? Were you speaking to supervisors, other colleagues in the field? Take us through sort of your mindset back at that stage when you're thinking about which way to pivot.
Yeah, I think for me, it was sort of ruling out what I didn't want to do primarily. The sports science degree is quite broad. At the time, I didn't really like how broad it was, but in hindsight, I think that was quite good because I let my sort of passion evolve quite organically. It wasn't really sort of forced down a particular path, which for me was great because it gave me a bit more time to make those decisions. I did have some really early on discussions with a guy named Rog Augie, who was at the Western Bulldogs. I'm not sure if he's still there or not, but he was quite heavily entrenched in Victoria University. And we were going to look at potentially doing a research paper, like an honours PhD type thing with GPS. We had some discussions about it, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So from there, I was actually to the careers and development program that I met the regional manager of the Western Jets, Shane Sexton. And he basically gave me an internship it was high performance, but realistically it was basically just strength and conditioning in the TSC Cup level at that point. It was quite new. It wasn't all that well funded at that point. And it was just very generic, like run warm-ups, fill water bottles, run some stretching sessions, just very general preparation. And I love the TAC Cup, and my love for strength and conditioning as a profession really took off around about then, about the age of 21. I was like, this is what I want to do. I love to work with developing athletes. It wasn't necessarily about working with professionals for me back then. And I've said a number of times, if that was a full-time job and I could have made it a living through the TC Cup, I would have loved to have spent more time there. But obviously, as the system is, you sort of need to continue to evolve and grow and make it a living. And for that reason, that's where I look to sort of move on after about 7 years there.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. So the power of networks, eh? So you got a foot in the door with Western Jets. Were you the first sort of guy that were appointed in that position, or was someone leaving?
I worked in conjunction with a guy named Owen McIntyre, who's now a teacher, I think. But Owen was great. And just after my first year there, I was still quite young in the scheme of things. I think I was 20 or 21. So I was very fortunate that Matthew Pell, who I know you know, is a great friend of mine. He came on board at the Western Jets then, having just finished an internship at North Melbourne, and he was a bit older than I am. And he was the first real high performance manager in that role that I had worked with, and I had a really steep learning curve. I call him Pally, but Matt's a incredibly intelligent guy. And him and Jamie Hepner were pivotal in pushing my career forward at that stage, going from Western Jets into Vic Metro, which ultimately led into my internship at Collingwood. And that was sort of my first real foray into the professional ranks of sport at that point.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah. So was it something that you were doing that was noticed? Like, how did that connection come from Western Jets to Collingwood? Do they have an affiliation at the time, or was it?
No, they didn't. So that's where I'm very fortunate. And I better give him a shout out because last time around a podcast I didn't. So Jamie, you can tag Jamie Hepner in this. I'm not sure if you know Jamie, but he's a star. He works over at Catapult now in Chicago. He was a fantastic mentor, as was Pally. And basically they just threw me to it, and threw me to the wolves and said, listen, we know you can coach, so get out there and do it. And it was really through those opportunities of just showing up, doing the work, showing up, and really taking pride in it, I think was a big thing. I still take pride in having worked at the Western Jets now. I'm really enjoying my time there. It's a great foundation for my career at that particular place and point in time. But Jamie then sort of pushed me into a role at Vic Metro, which he put me forward for, and I was successful with that, with the under-16s Vic Metro. I did that for 4 years, and then at the same time, Jamie teed up the internship at Collingwood off the back of that because they were looking for an intern back then. And I was there for a couple of years. I worked with a few different people. Blake McLean, who's now over at Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA. I worked with Marty Gervin. I'm sure you know Marty as well. Fantastic strength coach. Learned a lot in a short period of time. Bill Davin was the high performance manager, as well as Chris Seville was the physio. Paul Marasco was the strength coach as well. So I worked with a few different guys there and spent 2 years there. And then ultimately there was no spot for me after a couple of years. There was no paid role coming up, and I couldn't really intern again for a third year. So Jamie Hepner basically called me one day and said, look, would you come to America? And I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to go to America and do college football. That conversation took place, and I think within a week he said, I've got a spot for you, but you have to be ready to jump at it. And I took a phone call, I think July 4 or 5, and then by July 16 I was in North Carolina working in college football. Wow. And it happened all within 10 or 11 days. And again, that was probably the next stepping point in my career once I stepped away from football for a little bit.
Yeah, huge. So at that time you just finished, you did a fair bit of work for low pay, like you mentioned, for a few years at Western Jets, and then Collingwood for 2.
Yep.
How was that, before we go into the American football phase, but for those listening that are in their degree that potentially haven't got any experience or have just started, obviously that would test your persistence. How did you fund that, and how did you sort of survive while putting in those hours? Because I'd imagine you'd be doing a fair few hours a week, as well as from an energy point of view, you'd be putting everything into it to help set up your career. For those listening that are S&Cs or want to be S&Cs, take us through the other things that you were doing at that time to survive.
Yeah, sure. Look, and the reality is there is an attrition rate. I'm sure there's some fantastic strength coaches and sports scientists that have been lost to the profession because of the grind and the attrition rate that does come with continually fronting up and doing internships and the antisocial hours, and not with any promise of it delivering. But for me, by that point in time, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I funded it with a day job in sportswear sales for a company called Sherwood Sportswear. And they didn't really know it at the time, but I took that role as a sales manager because it was about a 2-kilometre drive to Western Jets training. So I took an office job that I knew that I could punch out of at 5 o'clock. I had a 2-kilometre trip in Altona, and I live in Aspendale, so to Altona was about an hour and 15 drive every day. But I was like, I'll drive out in the morning, I'll do my 9 to 5, finish at 5, go across the Western Jets and do sort of 5:30 till about 8:30 at night, drive home, get home at 9:30 and do it all again the next day. So that initially funded my first couple of years at the Western Jets. I had a full-time job as a sales manager. Again, it was a necessary step at that point in my career that it funded my career development. That's the way I look at it. It was really an investment. And I think most things people can look at it like it's a sacrifice or it's an investment. But for me, everything I've ever done has been an investment because ultimately I think it's a philosophical thing. But with a sacrifice, there's no net return, or there's a loss. But with an investment, there's always a positive return. So that's how I looked at it at the time, and it worked quite well. Then after a couple of years of that, I started to pay off a bit of my HECS debt. I had some more opportunities coming up with Collingwood, and obviously Collingwood train during the day. So the office job was sort of come to the point in time where I had to sort of forego the money to pursue the opportunity at Collingwood, and that's what it came down to. So I quit my sales job basically because I wanted to have the opportunity to work during the day, albeit for free. And at that point in time, actually, again, I didn't give him out a shout out last podcast, and you'll bust my balls if I don't this time, but Christian Woodford, I actually bumped into one day. We had a chat. And he took a chance on me as quite a young coach and allowed me to develop my skills in the private sector coaching. So I started joining with him, and basically what I did was I did the normal sort of PT strength and conditioning grind where I did sessions at 6, 7, 8 in the morning, drove into Collingwood, interned during the day, drove home at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, either went to the Western Jets at night or did some PT sessions after work. And at that point in time, the flexibility and the development that Christian provided me was pivotal in allowing me to continue my career as a strength coach in the professional sector, because ultimately for a long time in my life, the private sector subsidized my professional pursuit. So I definitely owe Christian for that.
Yeah, fantastic. There'd be a couple of the things that so the sales manager experience. Do you think the skill sets that you developed as being a salesman helped you coaching in hindsight? Was there elements of it transferred?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to learn to communicate with people. That's not something that university teaches. I'm not naturally an overly extroverted guy, and for those who haven't met, I'm 5'10" and about 75 kilos ringing wet. So to learn to communicate and really generally get along with athletes, I had to learn to communicate in a way that would say, hey, I've got the confidence and the skill set, and demonstrate that through being able to apply what I could do physically. So being able to train was big for me, and actually demonstrate exercise was really big. But as well as to develop my confidence dealing with lots of different people, I think the reality is to pursue professional sport in particular, and even in the private sector, you're always selling. In the private sector, you're selling yourself to clients, or you're selling yourself to potential clients or their parents, perhaps. But in the professional sector, you're actually selling yourself to stakeholders. You're telling CEOs, hey, this is what I'm worth, or you're saying to GMs, this is the philosophies that I bring to the program, and this is what I can actually contribute. And you need to actually market and sell yourself. So I think a lot of those skills are from the time you become a strength coach, you become a de facto salesman, largely because you need to learn to demonstrate your skill set, but also show what you can bring to the club that's unique to someone else. And that's at the heart of sales.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so you mentioned that the importance of connecting with Woodford and working on your craft in the coaching sense. So, how did you manage yourself from a workload point of view with those early starts and late finishes?
A great question. I actually really didn't. That's probably where I let my quality of life slip for quite a while, and I didn't realize it at the time. I was in a bit of a vortex where I just thought that was normal, but I was taking sessions at 5 in the morning, and I was taking sessions at 9 at night, and working all day in between, and I really had no idea that there was any different way of doing it. So I don't necessarily think that was something that I would advocate, but it was something that I had to learn the lesson of what actually got me to the breaking point where going across to NC State in college football was a bit of a circuit breaker, because it meant that I was in one place all day, as opposed to driving around to 2 or 3 different job sites. And it's probably the first time I had to basically wake up in the morning and be somewhere and stay there till the job was done. So For me, that was great. And again,
Yeah.
excuse me, Christian was a great support of that because he knew that ultimately my pursuits were not going to be with his business long term. But we complemented each other really well, albeit we're very, very different people. For those who know Christian, those who know me, we are not the same person. We're not even close. We're not even the same type of coach. We're very, very different. But at that point in time, what I contributed to his business and what I got out of it in return from him were great. And it allowed me to go across to NC State and say, hey, if I'm going to make it as a professional coach, I need to be able to wake up at 5 o'clock, be at the gym at 5:30, quarter to 6, and you're actually running 1, 2, 3, 4 weight sessions back to back, and then writing programs, and they come and lift after practice. They're doing a study hall. Sometimes they're doing 2 a day. Like, the college system is really a different beast. And I came home from that exhausted, but also the sense of like, hey, this is what I want to do. So I need to find a way to make it work. And I worked with a guy named Tim Rabis over at North Carolina State, and you won't find him on any social media. He's a bit of an enigma. But again, Jamie Hepter set me up with Tim, and outside Matthew Powell and Jamie and Christian, who we've touched on, and Nick Popovich, who I'm sure we'll talk about later. Tim was one of the greatest influences on my career, genuinely good friend of mine. And I learned a hell of a lot in a short period of time. It was a baptism of fire going over there.
Yeah, awesome. So for those, I don't think we have had anyone that's worked in American football in the college system on this podcast. So take us through, what was the interview process like? What was it like being on the plane going over there, and then how did you find the environment itself? You touched on it a bit there, but how different was it to the Australian strength and conditioning?
Chalk and cheese. It could not have been more different, which is what I needed. I needed something different. I needed a circuit breaker, although I hate that term. Haven't been in lockdown for 12 months here. It's probably not the best one, but I needed
it back.
Yeah, I needed some variety, and I needed a bit of a change. I needed a change of scenery. I had a few things going on in my life then that I needed to just take a bit of a break from. And so the interview, going back to your first part, the interview process, Jamie called me. Jamie sent me a text one day. I was actually at Vic Metro. I think we just played the first game of Nationals. And he said, hey, would you consider coming to America he was over there at that point. He goes, would you consider coming to America to do a college football seasonal assistant role, which is basically like an internship. It's sort of halfway between a coach's role and then an internship. It's a bit more structured and a bit more than an internship. It's not a coach's role that you don't get paid. It's just you don't have any expenses. So you get food hall passes, you get travel paid for. I lived with Tim, who put me up for accommodation. So there's lots of benefits from that point of view. It wasn't like a traditional American internship, but yeah, he called me and goes, would you come over? I said, yeah, no problem. Like, that sounds great. It's something I've always thought about doing, like the lure of American college and particularly college football, being a fan of it. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. It's something I'd love to do one day. And he goes, well, you don't really have one day. I've got something organized for you. I've just got all this catapult GPS down at NC State. I'd love someone to come and teach him how to use it a bit better. I know that's a skill of yours, which he and I developed. He was a great mentor for me in that regard. And I think 2 days later, I was on the phone to Tim, and I think 11 days later, or 12 days later, I flew across to North Carolina. I'd never even met Tim, and it happened quite quickly. It was a bit of a whirlwind. I think in that 12 days I had, we went to the Gold Coast for under 16 Vic Metro Nationals for footy. So I was up there for a week. So I had about 2 or 3 days either side of that to pack my bags and go. And I rocked up on Tim's doorstep, and he wasn't even there, actually. I had to get let in with a spare key. Never met the guy, but I just had to take a chance that was going to work out. And Aussie guy rocked up in this little house in North Carolina, and that's where it went from.
And what was the first day like? How were you introduced to the group? And
just thrown into it. I actually got pumped up a little bit, probably unnecessarily so. I know the caliber of guests you've had on this podcast, and I'm probably the most underwhelming of all of those. You've had some great speakers on here, but they sort of sold me as this Aussie guy who's great at sports science, and he's going to come across here and do A, B, C, D. And I thought, wow, it's a great selling point. Thank you. But so they're actually in max out weeks. They were at the end of summer workouts. So for those who are not familiar with summer workouts, it's basically the culmination of the whole summer training block that they go in and max out their list. So I think the second day I was there, they maxed out their cleans. Then they maxed out the squats the day after. Then they maxed out their bench press. They did some sprint testing amongst that. And that whole week was testing. And the first week was basically load the bar up, strip the bar, warm athletes up, give them some coaching cues. But I did a lot of filming to film some workouts to film their lifts for feedback purposes.
Yep.
And then it was straight into fall camp. And fall camp is basically like the equivalent of an AFL preseason, but you train twice a day. They do practice session in the morning and then weights, then go back and do practice session at night, or they do weights, practice, then weights, and they flip it around, all sorts of stuff. So I think that was something like they can't do it anymore because the NCAA college football changed the rules about how many workouts the students are allowed to do. But I think we did 37 sessions in 24 days, something like that, something crazy. So very, very different system to the AFL. Big explosive lifts, lots of cleans, lots of snatches, lots of speed work, really well drilled, very military-like in a lot of ways, which haven't come out of the AFL, which is generally, in my experience, is pretty unstructured, not quite run the same sort of demeanor. Really high energy weight rooms. As I said, everything's done to a T. Everyone knows where they need to be when the whistle blows, and they know what they need to do. So for me, it was like, okay, welcome to the show. Here we are. Like, let's do it.
And how would those sessions be split for the S&Cs that are listening in? Like, is it max out, with their speed days and then heavy days, or what would a typical week look like?
Well, in the fall camp, they had to pull it back a little bit because they just come off that max out week at the end of summer training. So once they hit fall camp, it's obviously about producing on the field for their football sessions. So they still lifted heavy. They lifted really close to their max, but obviously reduced the volume quite a lot. The speed stuff basically became either part of their warm up for their scrimmages, or they did individual speed sessions indoors at the football facility. In terms of how they structured their week, it'd basically be they try and do the speed on the low volume field days. So on the short days in the practice field, they do a lot more speed work. On their high volume days on the field, they do a lot of strength work because they just said, listen, your body has to be robust. And they take a bit of a different approach to what my experience in Australian football has been. They treat the human body in a much more robust and resilient way, where they push it right to limits, and not necessarily that's always works, because there is an attrition rate and there are a lot of guys that break down. And in some ways it's a bit of a survival of the fittest mentality, where if you get through summer workouts, you get through fall camp, then you're fit to play. And if you break down, bad luck. My role was sort of going across there and saying, okay, that's good in theory, but let's actually apply some science to that, to have some undulation in their training program. So not every day is more practice periods, more weights, more sessions. It was sort of how can we structure that to optimize the results at the end of fall camp. And that's what Jamie Hepner is doing right now over with a lot of NFL teams. And he guided me through that process as well. He was phenomenal. Sorry, Jack, I've just lost you there.
One second, guys.
Sorry, mate, I've got you back there. I'm not quite sure where I lost you.
That's better now?
Yeah.
How did the players go about wearing GPS units and being monitored?
Sorry, did you catch most of that previous answer? I think I lost you just for a little bit there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. It was just me lagging. My Wi-Fi just cut out a little bit there.
That's right, mate. No worries. Yeah. Look, they actually wore it in their shoulder pads. So they didn't necessarily love it. They disagreed with a lot of the data that came back. But it's something new to them. It's not something they've grown up with. Like, they don't really it's sort of more customary now, but they haven't always had access to GPS and tracking technology over in America. That's something that's really an Australian initiative, especially on the world scale. So Catapult starting as an Australian brand of AIS. Look, it was my job to go and put it through 80 sets of shoulder pads. So, if you could imagine now, we've got like little vests, like little sort of silicone of Lycra vests. We put them in for AFL guys and rugby guys. That takes about 10 seconds per vest to do. Shoulder. I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen NFL shoulder pads, but a lot tougher to get the GPS tucked in behind that, stuck in, make sure the Velcro sits. And it took about an hour and a half to get the GPSs in the shoulder pads. So, if we were on the field at, say, 10:30, I'd have to be downstairs at 9 o'clock putting the GPSs in the shoulder pads, because that's quite literally how long it took some days. It was crazy.
So why couldn't they use the bibs? Like,
basically because they've got too many layers on. So the guys will already they'll wear like their compression top, then they'll wear their shoulder pads, and then they wear their jersey. So adding a fourth layer to that's not necessarily something that they aspire to do. especially when you're training in the middle of, like, North Carolina was about 90, 95 Fahrenheit, which is about 30 to 32 degrees every day. Those guys are training through that. So adding a fourth layer was just not really an option. Those guys are working pretty hard as it is. So I think it's just better designed to go on the shoulder pads to pick up a lot of the inertial movements, like the tackles and the hits and that sort of stuff they wear that they wear the shoulder pads for.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously the game, like you mentioned, how the environment in the weights room was fairly different.
Yeah,
In the way it was structured, but also the intensity that was in the room. I mean, the sports are different, but do you think there's other things, like was there a lot of talent in the squad, therefore you could afford to lose a few players, or was it just the nature of the beast? They were super competitive. Like, why do you think that?
Look, I think it's probably, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, there's about 110 guys on a roster for college football. Obviously, you got some seniors, you got some red shirts, so it's a bit of a mix. But culturally, that's just how they've done it. America's always sort of been, if 2 hours of weights is good, then 3 hours is better. If 4 days of weights is good, 5 days is better. So, but I think there's a real good merit to it to sort of say to the guys, hey, like, you've got to really go out there and work every day. It's not going to come to you. And ultimately, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have seen some of the physiques on the guys coming out of college football, and genetics do play a big part of that, but also the program that North Carolina State in particular put together, I'm really proud to have been a part of, because it's not left to chance. Like, these guys are eating well, they're meticulous with their diet, they rock up to the weights room, they stretch, they rehab, they recover, just so they can train as hard as they physically can. So I think the thing with the attrition rate is, yes, the roster spots are big, but by and large, it is a game in American football. You can dominate with athleticism. I think a lot of sports such as, soccer, Australian football, basketball, even to an extent, there's a big skill component that probably overrides the athleticism component. But especially for some positions in NFL and American football at the college level, pure simple athleticism can be the difference between winning and losing a game at that level. So, some guys can actually play their entire career and never touch the ball, which is pretty crazy, really. So if your job is to block or your job is to sack the quarterback, you may not touch the ball your entire career, but you have to have the strength and the power and the conditioning to actually fulfill your role. And that's where the training had to reflect that as well.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. And then how did you, as a coach, like seeing that environment, seeing the way they go about it when you came back to Australia, what was your approach? Did you go about things different? Did you pick up some different methods? Take us through.
I did. And in hindsight, my approach probably wasn't the right one. I came back a little bit of a chip on my shoulder and thought I had it all figured out by that point. I sort of thought, like, I've been around AFL clubs, I've worked in American football, I've done this, I've done that. And I sort of thought I had all the answers at the age of about 27, which was really dangerous. So I was at a point in my career where I thought I was good. I had the confidence that I could do my job, and I probably tried to implement a little bit too much of what really didn't work in Australian football. I came back from America and got a role at the Casey Demons at the Melbourne Football Club. So I worked with some great guys like Alex Sakajiji and Jimmy McGeoch. I worked with Dave Misson. I'm sure you know Misso as well. I worked with Daniel Cross. Matt Warno put me up for the role initially. So there were some really, really smart guys around. Even Kane Johns, I know you work with Kane now. Kane's a superstar with what he does too. And I sort of came back with these ambitions that everything I learned in America could apply to Australian football. The reality is there's certain things that definitely could have applied and I could have implemented them a lot better, but Australian football is a very unique sport. And I think the thing for me was at that time trying to figure out which things transferred back, which things needed to stay the same. But also with Australian football, what can we do to break the status quo and what can we change to actually optimize our current training methods, which are pretty common across most AFL clubs. So things like, how do we train speed? What should we do in the weight room? How much conditioning should we do? Those sorts of things were what I struggled with trying to find the right balance. I probably pushed too far one way. I didn't actually respect the fact that AFL is quite a unique sport, but I had a fantastic team I worked with that we got some great results down at Casey. So, we made it to we had a development league grand final win. We made it to a grand final against your mob, Box Hill, actually. Had a 3 or 4 goal lead quite early on, which we blew. So, we had a great team and the guys worked really hard to be in a position to succeed. But ultimately, look, coming back and trying to run a high performance management role in both VFL and assisting the AFL system was just a really big culture change. And to be honest, part of me always missed America. I love the environment. I love the athletes. I love the coaching staff. I love the philosophies over there. And ultimately, I love my time in football circles, but that's where it was sort of time for me to move on and try something different. So that's what actually led me down the basketball path, and that's probably where I am today. That I've got that real mix of, athleticism, power, speed, agility, lots of drills that I learned in America that I can attribute to basketball a lot more directly with my skill set now as it sits. But I love the nature of basketball. I love the athleticism involved, and look, I'm really fortunate that the staff and the players and the club as a whole at Melbourne United have been phenomenal to work with, and it's been an amazing couple of years there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great thing to interview someone that's had such a vast experience across different sports at such a high level. Like, it's something that actually does pop up a lot on the podcast. S&Cs that have been in the industry for 15, 20 years, the importance of S&Cs coming up, whether you've got 5 years, 10 years experience, or 10 to 20 years experience, but getting exposed to different sports rather than just sticking with one. It does make you vulnerable.
Yeah, I think so too. And look, on that note, everything I've achieved so far, as I said before, I probably owe it in particular to 5 guys, which is Nick Popovich, Christian Woodford, Jamie Hepner, Matthew Pell, Tim Rabis. They're probably my greatest 5 influences on my career to date. And without them, I wouldn't have had the vast collection of experiences that I have had. But I've also got some phenomenal networks, such as yourself. And a friend of mine, Matt Howley, works over in the MLS for Real Salt Lake and was in Notre Dame and college soccer before that. So I think that's given me a pretty broad experience of what I have done. But by the same token, the reality is for me, I'm 31. So I'm quite young in the scheme of things. And whilst I'm flattered to be on the podcast, I'm glad you reached out, mate. I think when I look at the caliber of guests you've had and how much there is out there to learn, I'd much rather listen to some of those guys you've had in the podcast and speak about it, because I've still got a lot to learn around how to prepare, not just basketballs, but athleticism in general.
Yeah, and was it something you're intentional with when you think back in uni? Were you thinking, did you write a list? Did you write goals 5, 10 years, or is it something where a mentor like those 5 guys came at you and said, "Hey Jay, I know you're doing this, you're doing great things, but I've got this on offer. Are you interested?" And then you'll sit with it, go with your gut feeling. Do you look back at that previous plan? Like, how deliberate and structured was it, and how much was it just sort of listening to those mentors and going with what you felt was right at the time?
It's been, look, definitely a mix of both, but much more the latter, where I'll always go with my gut. For me, the fulfillment that I get from work, I weighted far too heavily, and probably similar to yourself, we spend so much time pursuing those roles in professional sport at a young age that you do sacrifice other parts of your life. And having had the opportunity to work in multiple professional sports and work across in America, I was always like, yep, if they say this is the right thing to do, then that's the right thing to do. And I sort of put my trust in the mentors I had, and they certainly did not lead me astray. Everything that I achieved and the exposure that I had came from those guys collectively. As I've sort of gotten older, I've had some great opportunities to interview for some professional teams. I've had some job offers in professional sport. I've had some job offers, and now that I'm at the point in my life where I don't think I'm necessarily established just yet. I've got a lot more work to do in that regard, but for me, it's just about going with your gut and sort of saying, okay, I think intrinsically everyone knows when something's the right fit for them, and it's also really important to know when the right time to move on is. I sort of felt like I was putting a ceiling on myself working in AFL. Born and raised in Melbourne, you sort of do the standard sort of thing. You play footy and cricket, you go to TC Cup, you go to VFL, go to AFL. And with all due respect to people that I learnt from those areas, I wanted to get something different. That's where America was really great for me. But then ultimately, I think to further enhance my skill sets as a coach, I had to be around some different people and learn some different sports. And I love basketball. I always have. And I reached out to Nick Popovich, who I know you spoke to last week, and he's a real dear friend of mine now. He's been great to work with for a couple of years now. And I think the opportunity to learn from him, he won't tell you about his credentials, but he holds the Emeritus Award at the NSCA, which, there's only 40-something people that have that award in the world. I just want to learn from the best and be around them, and that's where my fulfillment comes from. So right now, that's where I really enjoy being with Melbourne United, and for me, it's more than that. It's the whole club. We've got a great board, we've got great coaches, great players, and ultimately, the enjoyment I get from going to work every day stems from being around those guys and having a really fulfilling role, and the trust and support of everyone around me as well.
Yeah, it's awesome that you've gone about it that way. And how did you, when you're interviewing for a role, it sounds like a couple of these you've been sort of put forward and recommended, which definitely helps. But has there been a position where you, like maybe this one, where you've hit up Nick and you said, I really want to work under you, can I get a role? Is there any opportunity? How do you prove to a club or a GM or everyone that, that if you haven't worked in that sport, for SCs that are listening that are potentially interviewing for a role, but they might not have experience in that sport yet, how do you go about giving confidence to those that are listening that you're the guy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think ultimately, and I do it now when I'm in a position to do so, but you just need people to take a chance on you. And I think for people to take a chance on you, which, as I said, everyone I mentioned before, they certainly took a chance on me. I'm sure you're the same. People taking a chance on you at some point. They can smell bullshit. So you just have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. There's no point trying to portray something you're not. For example, I'm not an overly authoritarian, aggressive, big presence in the weight room. That's not how I communicate. So my strengths are my theoretical knowledge, my application of scientific principles, and my ability to integrate them into a high performance program. How to collaborate, all those things. That's my strength. So I know that. I've always played to that, and there's no point in me trying to be someone I'm not. So I think for the young coaches out there, and even the young sports scientists out there, it is competitive. You'll get knocked back, and I've been knocked back, but I've also been very successful with some roles. Some I've taken up, some I've declined. But I think to everyone whether they've offered me the role or not, I've taken something from the experience and learnt from it. And as I said before, the number one thing for me is just be relentless and keep pursuing. If it's what you want to do, you'll find a way to make it work. I genuinely believe that. But equally as much, just be authentic and be yourself, because there's no point, as we spoke before, Christian Woodford, for those who know Christian, there's no point in me trying to be him. There's no point in me trying to be Nick Popovich. There's no point in me trying to be Matthew Pell, Jamie Hepner, Jack McLean. You just have to forge your own identity and just be really truthful with that approach.
Yeah, love that philosophy, mate. And I think it's a really important one for anyone to listen to, athlete or coach, or just someone who's just tuned into the podcast. Because like you said, there is only one you, and that's probably another element that you've brought up there that has popped up a fair bit from a performance point of view, that if you get bogged down on your weaknesses, they're only going to grow so far. But if your strengths are the reason you use strengths, and sharpening that one wood or those couple of strengths that you have is just as important as topping up your weaknesses, particularly as an S&C, because there's sports science, there's rehab, there's strength, there's conditioning, there's like you said, the art of it with the communication layer. So it can be quite overwhelming, and we live in a world where there's so much information as well.
And look, Matt, like I'll be honest with it. I received a really funny text from a very good friend of mine who will remain nameless, but just after Melbourne United won the championship just recently, I had a friend text me and say, "Congratulations, you're the skinniest strength coach to ever win a championship medal." And I was like, "Come on, man! Like, let me have my time in the sun." But I'm not a big stature guy, so I think it's just again part of that as well is just own your craft. And if you want to be a strength coach, you need to lift, you need to condition, you need to put yourself through these things. If you want to be a sports scientist, you need to actually do the same thing. You need to go through what athletes go through so you can understand the processes and be really relatable as well.
Yeah, I love that, mate. And you've had those different experiences as well, like you said, with Catapult and then rehab at Melbourne and then manager. Like that, working in different sports, was that a deliberate approach to hone your craft, or things?
It was. It was absolutely. It was definitely something that I always sort of set my mind to. And it's funny, if I actually reflected back on it, I didn't necessarily write it down, but I always knew what I wanted to achieve. And I've achieved a lot of those things to date. So I've sort of reset my goals, and I don't necessarily speak about them all that publicly. I'm a pretty private person usually. I don't have a social media account dedicated to my coaching. I don't tweet a lot. I don't use LinkedIn a lot. I certainly don't have a Coach Jay Facebook page or anything like that. But I know where I want my career to get to, and I surround myself with people that can help me with that. But also, as much as they help me, I need to provide value back to them where I can as well. And I think ultimately, like I said before, just being really authentic and being really genuine is important, because your relationships with your athletes and the stakeholders involved in those is basically your best reference. And I say that with all sincerity, because with a recent job process I went through, the coach that interviewed me actually called one of the athletes I work with and wanted to know from the athlete how I was. I didn't know that at the time. And like it's really flattering to hear that feedback from the guys I work with, that I'm making an impact on them. But I need to keep fronting up every day, not being complacent. Complacency is a killer. And just keep the passion, because as soon as you lose the passion, like the hours are long, they are antisocial, they will take you away from birthdays and those sort of things from time to time. But if you're fulfilled by your work, then you can overcome those things. So I think just keeping that passion for you is really important. And for me, my passion comes from being involved with winning teams and really fun environments of really caring people when everyone's on the same page. I think that's what gets me to work every day.
Yeah, I love that, mate. We're getting close to the pointy end now. I know it's been some time, and I'm sure that it can be challenging at the end of the night to go this deep in, but I really appreciate your time.
No, not a
What's
problem
been
at all.
a standout challenge in your career to date so far, and what did you learn, or how did you grow from that challenge?
Probably one of the biggest challenges, I won't say which club, but I got knocked back for a job at an AFL club that ultimately one of my assistants got. So I was actually a high performance manager at the time. One of my assistants ended up getting the role, and that was a real challenge mentally for me, because I was happy for him, but at the same time I sort of thought, what am I doing to miss out on these roles? So I reflected upon myself, and ultimately I just think I got the feedback from the interview where I had to know myself better, was basically it. Because I remember one of those questions I got was, what makes you angry? And I couldn't answer it. It was a bit of a curveball question. I was sitting there like, I don't know what makes me angry. So the challenges I went through from that were like going, shit, I thought I was ready for that job. I got overlooked for someone a couple of years younger than me that I'd actually mentored and taught. So in that regard, I was really happy that I'd facilitated his career development. But then I had to look at myself and go, okay, why did I get him where I want to go? And it came back to just knowing myself and knowing who I am as a coach. And as I said before, that's why I can pretty sincerely give the advice just to be yourself. Because I do know what makes me angry, and I do know what makes me happy. My athletes will tell you both those things, but that's been great. And I guess the other big challenge for me was moving overseas. Moved over to North Carolina by myself on 10 days notice and not a lot of money in the bank, and basically just had to go, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, then we'll see what happens. And ultimately it did, and it was a great experience for me. So they're probably the two biggest things that have both turned into real positives for my career so far.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Thanks for being so open and honest and sharing that. And that is a curveball question. Certainly not something I've been asked before, but it gets.
Man, I've had some crazy ones. Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, yes, I love that you're sharing that, and no doubt anyone that's listening might think about their answer now. So
it was just such a simple question, because everyone knows what makes them angry, but I didn't really have the skills to articulate it.
Yeah, when you're in an interview, it can get you off guard. You're like, well, you don't know but like you said, being authentic is a good go-to, and
Yeah.
And then that's great that it set you up in such a strong philosophy of yours is being yourself and owning your strengths from that and knowing yourself. So no, thanks for sharing. We'll go on the flip side now, mate. What are you excited about for the rest of the year? What gets you pumped?
A lot of things. Another NBL championship would be nice. I'm greedy. One's not enough. I think Pop's got 5 now, my mentor. So it'd be nice to look back. I won't give away his age, but he's got about 20 years on me. So it'd be nice to look back in a few years and stack up those rings. I'm just looking forward to what's to come with the year. It's obviously been a pretty troubling year for everyone involved in the fitness sector, and everyone's sort of lost jobs and taken pay cuts, and gyms have been closed. There's been all sorts of things going on. So for me, some sort of sense of normality would be great. From a career point of view, I want to get cracking with United again. The fulfillment that I got from winning the championship and being involved in a winning team was something that I'll never forget. It was a life-changing experience for me, and something that I really do hold dearly. And as I said before, I can't thank Pop enough for mentoring me along the journey to be involved in that. So I can't wait till preseason starts. I'm a bit of a freak in that way. I love it. I love the guys coming back into the gym. I love being back on court, and I love all the environment that brings with it. And just getting back in the gyms. I run my own business out of a place called Hoop City. So to the owners of Hoop City, I'm not sure if they listen to this, but they're great supporters of me as well, and Melbourne United. So just building up some things at Hoop City and just continue to develop my strengths as right now as a strength conditioning coach in basketball.
Season. Oh, have I lagged again?
You did for about 10 seconds, mate, but I got you back.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll thank you again, mate, for jumping on, and really appreciate your time and your experiences from the beginning all the way through to now. And looking forward to having a chat with you, hopefully near in the future.
Yeah, it'd be great. And look, as I said before, mate, I'm not really on social media a whole lot, but if anyone has any questions and they want to reach out to you in particular, please feel free to do so. Reach out to Jack and get in touch. I'm sure he'll point you in my direction. I'm more than happy to have someone email or call me, because I've had some great mentors assist me along the way, and ultimately I wouldn't be where I am without them. But you can find me down at Hoop City. So if you guys are over in the Cheltenham area, you want to come down to Hoop City and shoot some hoops or get in the gym, you can find me down there as well.
Yeah, I'll add the either the website link off you and put it in the show notes.
No worries. Actually, you know what I'm looking forward to, mate? I'm looking forward to the Boomers playing tomorrow. Hopefully we can take down the US. That's something else which would be great.
Yeah, they're in good form. Be a good game.
It'd be nice if Jock Landau, Chris Goulding and Daly, all the United boys, if they can go and have 20 or 30 points each, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, we'll watch and see. Hopefully. Fingers crossed, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Jay. Speak soon, mate.
No worries, mate. Thank you.
See ya. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And that was a really good chat with Jay. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I know I did. We'll launch the podcast in some coming weeks, so make sure you subscribe to iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube to get the recording when we launch it in a future Monday. And if you're interested in joining our academy, it's a subscription-based platform that's on Patreon. I'll have the notes in this feed, but just watch this video for a little bit of information. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time. Cheers, guys.
Hi, I'm Jack McLean, an AFL football strength and conditioning coach, and I want to introduce you to the Prepare Like a Pro Academy. Our academy is a subscription-based platform where you can sign up to be a part of our community. If you get to the end of each episode of the podcast and are hungry for more, this is for you. Designed for aspiring AFL athletes and staff, you'll receive heaps of bonus weekly content, learn who the guests are in advance, and submit questions. Access to our Facebook group with Jack and other Prepare Like a Pro coaches. You'll be able to receive merchandise, program discounts, and freebies, and get free access to our live events, exercise technique database, and much more. This is a great way for you to support the podcast, and it helps me with production and release of epic content for you guys each week. Your contribution goes a long way in making the Prepare Like a Pro community possible. For a small monthly fee, you'll have access to all of the special content released on our Academy forums. There's no lock-in and you can cancel absolutely anytime.